Thanks, Marcy. Nice to be back at the KVR. So the last couple of years when I've been in charge of these programs, I've traveled around the state and I've given lots of talks on wolves, lots of talks on cougars, lots of talks on black bears, but never all three together. So I showed up at the reserve mid-afternoon today and put 3 talks together, 126 slides. No, I pared it down a wee bit. So we've got a lot to cover. The carnivore community in Wisconsin, of course, is real diverse, includes lots of cool species, the weasels, raccoons, foxes, coyotes, skunks, things like that, but I'm going to focus on the large carnivores. The DNR, in terms of management, separates these 3 species, wolves, black bears, and cougar, from the other, not because ecologically they're really distinct, they're in the same order, Carnivora, but because of the way they interface with us. Ecologists can measure this over time just by estimating deer and wolf numbers in the same area. And if these systems are regulated in a top-down fashion, that is, we collect population estimates of both species, when wolf numbers are up, deer numbers must go down, right? But isn't it also possible that these systems can be regulated in a trophic fashion by the quality of the habitat? Deer numbers aren't regulated by wolves. They're regulated by how much browse, fawning habitat, etc. is on the landscape. That regulates deer numbers, and then wolves are just along for the ride, right? If the deer herd's healthy, there'll be some wolves around. We can also determine whether or not that's the way these systems operate by plotting deer numbers versus wolf numbers. But now, wolf numbers are just along for the ride. They only increase when deer numbers are able to increase. The problem is, study after study, when we look at this, it can be one, bottom-up regulation, or top-down. It sometimes varies one year to the next within a system or across systems. Think about this. Who hunts deer? When you go out to your deer stand, opening morning, optimistic like everybody is opening day, you see a set of wolf tracks. What's your reaction? Turn around, throw your gun in the ditch and say, no deer out in the woods, there's wolves. Or do you say, these wolves are here for a reason. There must be deer. I had a great discussion. A good friend of mine, Peter David, works for the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission up in the North Woods. And he was laughing at me. He said, you guys, your hunters are nuts. I read these articles. A guy says, I smelled a wolf hair a mile from my tree stand, so I gave up deer hunting for the rest of my life. You hear these stories, right? These guys believe in top-down regulation. Peter said most native hunters, when they see a wolf track, they think it's going to be a great day hunting. Because wolves wouldn't be there if there weren't abundant deer. And when you think about it, I talk to people who literally tell me, I've got wolves everywhere, the deer are gone. And you think, well, then how do you have wolves everywhere? So, it's all a matter of perspective. Wolves also focus on vulnerable prey, way more than we do. This is data from Minnesota. Median age of does killed by wolves at the end of their reproductive life. 6.5 years old. Teeth are worn away. They're not going to have any more fawns. Hunters are taking them right at the head of that, right at the beginning of their vital reproductive years. So who's having a bigger impact? I'm not arguing here that wolves don't impact deer. They certainly do, but let's look at it realistically. We also know by looking at depredated deer, most or many of those animals are starving. Wolves are not Hoover vacuums. You get the impression that a pack of wolves just roams the landscape, sucking up every animal it encounters. It is difficult. and dangerous to take down even an adult white-tailed deer. An antler to the face, a broken jaw from a hoof can kill a wolf, and they know it. Even worse when we're talking moose and bison and some of the other prey wolves eat elsewhere. Their attacks usually fail. Minnesota attacks on white-tailed deer were successful only 1 in 5 times. Okay, it's challenging to be a wolf. If you want to read more about direct interactions between wolves and prey, this book came out a few years back by Dave Meach. Great book. Last thing, northern forest deer numbers for and I will not talk about last week's deer season summary. But for the 5 years before that, harvest and our population models indicated the northern forest deer herd was increasing, even though wolves have been established for a long time. So deer herd growth is possible, even with wolves on the landscape. CWD, wolves focus on vulnerable animals. Who's worried about CWD in our deer herd? What if, when a deer started to contract the disease and become debilitated, some magical creature arose that removed it from the landscape so that it couldn't transmit the disease? We don't know a lot about how this might operate. We don't have good field data yet, but some of the initial modeling work by scientists at Colorado State, Utah State, have suggested that wolf predation might reduce CWD transmission rates and therefore prevalence in deer herds. There was a wonderful study a decade or so ago on cougar predation of mule deer in an area where CWD was endemic. And these animals are targeting sick deer. Removing them from the population, it's reasonable then to think if a deer gets sick and is removed, it's not spreading the prions, and we might see reduced prevalence. Again, something to think about. All right, I promised Marcy 2 more wolf slides, and then cougars, and we're out of here. You guys okay? Yeah. I stare at a laptop every day, all day. This to me is just heaven. I mentioned that federal status, whether or not wolves are protected under the Endangered Species Act or not, has been one of the big hindrances to active management. This is a situation, and you know how many hours I spent trying to animate this PowerPoint? So endangered, threatened, or delisted so that the Wisconsin DNR has management authority. As the wolf population was increasing, of course, they're protected. They surpassed the recovery goal of 100, the state delisting goal of 250. The feds downlisted them to threaten, but there was a lawsuit. Animal rights group, protectionist groups sued the federal government based on some technicality, relisted. Then they were delisted. Lawsuit, relisted. Oh, but no, that was thrown out. So they were delisted. DNR had management. Oh, but no, lawsuit. And they're back on the endangered species list. 2011, they were delisted. We held our 3 wolf seasons, tried to move the population back to our state management goal. An injunction was filed by a federal judge, and they were added back to the endangered species list in December of 2014, and that's where they've sat ever since. Right? It's maddening, because this, in my mind, is not good for us. It's also not good for wolves. Public antipathy, the folks that are feeling the impacts of these animals on the landscape, don't have any recompense. Because we can't address depredation concerns through lethal control. We can't control the population through harvest. Nothing. Okay? And it's making, honestly, a mockery of the Endangered Species Act. If we can't delist a recovered species, we've got problems. But when wolves, this is something very fundamental many people don't realize, especially those people that call me and scream about wolves. When wolves are protected under the Endangered Species Act, the The state has no management authority. We monitor wolves. We do not actively manage wolves. We can only utilize lethal control under very specific circumstances. That is, if there's a threat to human safety, and that happens once, maybe twice, 3 times a year, wolf becomes habituated, loses its fear of people, it's got to be removed. Or for humane reasons. Wolf gets hit on I-39, has a broken back, we can euthanize. Yep.
Can DNR compensate the farmers or, if they've lost?
Yes. We do have a compensation program, so anytime an animal is depredated, that's true for hunting dogs, that's true for livestock, farmer can receive compensation. Okay. Interesting little point there. When wolves are federally protected, those payments come from our endangered resources account, not from the account that you may donate funds to. If you have a endangered resources license plate or you send in a $100 check to support, those don't go to damage compensation, wolf damage compensation. When wolves are delisted, and we have a hunting season, those payments will come from the sale of wolf season permit applications and licenses, etc. All right. This past March, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service proposed wolf delisting across the lower 48 states. They have until this coming March, 3 more months, to publish a final rule, which last I talked to my service colleagues, they're going to do. When that happens, wolves will be delisted. But, what is very, so, thinking of that graph that was read away, what's then very likely to happen? There will be a lawsuit. Federal judge receptive to that lawsuit will be located. There'll be an injunction. Very likely we'll see wolves delisted. The maddening part, to emphasize, and Marcy, I am almost agreed, to emphasize how maddening this political juggernaut has become, the folks, the organizations who don't want to see wolves harvested, that file these lawsuits, make money off them. They have membership campaigns. Save the wolf. Don't let it be slaughtered. Go extinct. Whatever. Become a member. Send dollars. And who pays taxes? Let me let you in on another little wrinkle. Turn the camera off now. I'm just kidding. Who's heard of the Equal Access to Justice Act? It was an act passed by Congress a number of years ago with a good intent. It was passed to allow disenfranchised, economically depressed people the chance to sue the federal government if they've been wronged. They may not be able to hire a lawyer, but you can sue the federal government and not pay the taxpayers pay your legal fees. Certain groups are using that law to sue the Fish and Wildlife Service to keep wolves on the endangered species list. The last time I saw a summary of those payments a couple years ago, the last time wolves were relisted, there was a law firm, I think in San Francisco, one of the lawyers over a 1.5 year period was making $678 an hour. Taxpayers, something like that, taxpayer dollars to keep wolves, a species that's recovered here in the Midwest. I want to talk about cougars. That's interesting. All right, who saw this video a year ago this past March? Brookfield, Wisconsin. Security camera outside this couple's front door. Trotting across the neighborhood was a mountain lion. Okay. Our phones went nuts. Diane Robinson, who's a local biologist down there, did 144 media interviews in 2 weeks. My life went off the rails. But these are all photographs of documented, confirmed cougars here in Wisconsin. So a little bit about cougars. We all know what they look like, right? The answer to that is no. Yes. From the sightings I get, we don't all know what a cougar looks like. Of the 3 cat species native to Wisconsin, mountain lions, cougars, pumas, whatever you want to call them, puma concolor, are the largest. Males exceeding sometimes 200 pounds, long bodies, tail nearly or better than half the body length, and that fairly uniform tawny coloration. If your buddy shows you a trail camera picture, you can't see the tail, there's a couple things to look for. One, if there's any spotting or barring on the legs or the sides, it's a bobcat. It's not a cougar. Cougars are almost always, once they're adults, this uniform tawny coloration. Bobcats also have white, black trimmed white patches on the backs of their ears. If that's visible, it ain't a cougar. Okay. But, oh, one little fun fact. Mountain lions, 200 pounds. Big cats, right? Taxonomically, within the family Felidae, there are two subfamilies. One includes the big cats, one the small cats. 4 species of big cats: lions, tigers, jaguars, and leopards. Mountain lions are in with the small cats. They're lumped in with bobcats. This guy is more closely related to that cute little thing than it is this. They're cougars taxonomically are small cats. One of the cool things that means, these guys can roar. These guys can't. Cougars do not roar. These guys can purr. These guys can't. So you've heard the mountain lion scream, right? That's like a loud meow. Because they can't roar. They're much larger. So here's a Mark Kenyon, who's our Northern District biologist, was the Orange County, California cougar guru for a lot of years. And so I've got a lot of nice photographs from Mark. They're much larger. We get photographs submitted as cougar photos all the time. Oftentimes they're house cats, believe it or not. We'll talk about that. But here's a nice trail cam of a house cat. There's a bobcat standing in the same place. Now look at the size distinction. That's a cougar. Much larger. If you think you've seen a cougar track, if you have a trail camera that you think is a cougar, before you contact us, go, if it's a photograph, a trail camera picture, send your son or your friend out there with a yardstick and have them stand, put that yardstick right where the animal was, take a picture, and we can compare the two. If it's a track, put a little ruler down next to it so we have some indication of size. Okay, it's very important. This was cool, so that when that cougar, what happens when there's a confirmed cougar sighting, everybody in the neighborhood sees a cougar. In the next neighborhood. The mania just takes over. So when that cougar showed up in Waukesha and Washington County last year, we started to get all kinds of sightings, and we got this photograph right here. If you look at that, who thinks that's a cougar? It certainly looks cat-like, right? You can't see the tail, tawny coloration, maybe a little white on the breast, but there's no perspective, no size perspective. So what this reporter did, I love this guy, he did a story on this. He made a little kitty cutout, and he stuck it in the ground right where that was, and that's the cutout. So that cougar was a house cat, okay? The problem, so this is where Scott Walter and colleagues in the DNR walk this tightrope. Because the people are telling us what they saw, right? And they firmly believe it. And they've already told their friends, and they've sold the movie rights to the cougar of Richland County, right? They bought in. Then they send it to us and ask us, and I look at it and I say, that's a beautiful house cat. And then I'm the conspiracy guy. I deny it. Right? It's a tightrope. And I mean that. And I don't mean to initiate laughter there, because we need to maintain communication with our public, right? That requires trust and respect. So when I say I walk a tightrope, I never just say, that's a house cat. I talk them through it. Why do you think this is a cougar? Well, here's something about cougars you may not know. So I try to get them to understand it's a house cat without saying you're wrong. Right? It's very important. Cougars are solitary animals. The only time you'll see them together is when the female has kits, dependent kits. That's important because there was a photograph circulating last year, ostensibly taken outside Tomahawk, Wisconsin Rapids, and I saw it somewhere in northern Illinois, passed around the internet, 3 adult cougars in this pack. And it was 3 days out of my schedule dealing with this sighting. What does it mean? Oh my God, overrun with cougars. Turns out it was photoshopped, right? And the photos were taken in Wyoming, wherever. But you have to deal with that. They have very large home ranges. Males, 50 to 200 square miles, massive, potentially, home ranges. Females, smaller, so one male might, within its territory, have multiple females. I mentioned the impact of bounties and predator control programs pushing these animals. Cougars, like black bears, like wolves, their range is expanding eastward. Right now there are 3 populations, established breeding populations, one in the Sandhills of Nebraska, one in the Black Hills of South Dakota, one along Teddy Roosevelt National Park, North Dakota Badlands, right? And dispersing males from those populations are showing up all over. In Wisconsin, we've got cougars. We do not have a breeding population of cougars, as far as we know. The reason is, just like I showed you that wolf moving around, black bears dispersing, young male cougars can travel incredibly long distances, looking for their own territory, looking for a female. Females don't. Like sow black bears, they settle near mom. So a female cougar that's reaching the age of independence here in the Black Hills will probably set up a territory here, or maybe here, right? Males can go long distances, as we'll see in just a second. So we have cougars in Wisconsin. They show up occasionally, but they're thought to be these dispersing males. We've got no evidence of breeding. On our cougar page, you go to the DNR website, you'll see all the sightings we've had over the last decade. Here's a bunch of pictures, cougars in Wisconsin. Oh, who saw this? See, I work so hard for you people. I do this cool stuff online, and nobody saw it. One of our biologists, Todd Noss, actually, local reported a cougar on his trail camera. Todd said, okay, let me see it. It was a series of photos. First photo, Bayfield County, 2 weeks ago, a white-tailed deer out along the edge of the field. You see that, Tom? Next photo, the back of a cougar head. Next photo, cougar dragging the deer to the ground. Next photo, the cougar pulling that deer toward the camera. Okay. So anyway, we've got a map showing all those sightings. Here's that cougar that showed up on the video, raised all the commotion last year. I said males can go a long distance. In 2011, we collected, I forget if it was blood or hair follicles, DNA from a cougar in northern Wisconsin. The analysis, the genotype of that DNA traced it back to the Black Hills. 2 months later, 60 days, this cougar that was in northwest Wisconsin was killed on a highway in Connecticut. 1,600 straight line miles. They figured it probably went over 2,700 miles in total. When I was in 7th grade, I'd have gone that far for Debbie Pash. That's what these critters are looking for. Why don't they settle down? There are no females, right? Once they leave the Black Hills, females don't disperse. They keep wandering. I tell people that all the time. When we confirm a cougar in Wisconsin, people are often concerned, and I always say, more than likely, it's long gone.
Did you say it was 2 months from Wisconsin to the East Coast?
Yep. One of the things about cougars, if you want to understand cougar behavior, who has a house cat? You're the same animal. You can interpret their facial expressions, ear position, body orientation in a very similar way. But they don't care about us. They care about eating, pooping, and sleeping. So they do very well in urban and suburban landscapes. That cougar in Washington County, Waukesha County last year, happy as a clam. There's tons of deer. Traffic going by, people walking, it didn't care. Right? They don't react like we we expect they should as a wild animal. You just look at these pictures. There's a Hollywood sign, famous Hollywood cougar, right? Missoula, Montana. Just head into the backyard to drink out of your kid's swimming pool. Right? These red dots, this is Los Angeles, California. Some of the parks, those are all cougar kill sites where they pull down deer, right, in amongst us. Obviously, when something like a cougar shows up outside its normal range, it initiates lots of interest. Right? There's Diane. I mentioned Diane. That's our biologist down in Waukesha County. But it's become recognized as what we in the trade call cougar hysteria. Not just in Wisconsin, but elsewhere. These cougars show up, and instead of a single male cougar dispersing through your state, it's cougars everywhere, and everything's a cougar, right? There's been, I'm looking at the clock here, I want to wrap up. There's been some really cool social research that's determined our reaction might be based in our history as a prey species. We are tuned into things that should scare us, and we react accordingly. Okay? I also have come to believe, and I am a redneck hunter to my bone, but I've also come to believe there's sort of a macho factor involved too. When there's something seen in the area, some guys don't want to be the last person not to see it. Oh hell, I saw that cougar 2 years ago. Right? Some of that stuff. So we get a lot of these mistaken identifications. All these things reported as cougars. Interestingly enough, we also have to track down and try to expose hoaxes. Right? These are all cougars, right? No, but they'll show up on Facebook, somewhere on the internet. Some guy, one outside Ithaca, just a year or two ago. Here's a photo of a cougar, trail camera right behind our farm. By God, we got to do something. All right, you do a Google search, backward search for the photo. That was taken in Wyoming. So people will grab photos off the internet. This is a cabin in Idaho, I think. It was showed up as having been taken in Solon Springs or some. There have been Spring Green, Barnabas, all these that we have to be very careful of. But if this is your buddy that posted that, you believe it, you share it with your 678 Facebook friends. They share it with their, it's like the old Brill shampoo commercial and so on and so on. And then Scott's phone starts ringing, and I'm just trying to get to lunch in the break room, right? And I'm thinking, what? Cougar and Margo? All right, quiz time. What is it? Yell it out. Bobcat. You can see a little evidence of barring there, that short tail. How about that?
Fisher.
Fisher? That was, no, can't be. It was sent in as a cougar. See that long tail? Yeah, that's a fisher. How about that? Obvious cat. See that slope back? Long tail. This is where perspective comes in. This woman took a picture out of her window, in front of her house, would not leave her house until we came out and investigated. We sent one of our guys across here to stand in that cat's tracks, and that cat, if his ankle was right here, it's a house cat. Okay, so size, perspective. Oh, there you go. Sent in obvious. It's a trail camera picture of a large yellow animal. Sent in as a cougar. This one? Alright, that's a cougar. Okay. But all those were submitted as cougars. Last thing. Holy Christ. Black Panthers. Just looking, I've been going an hour and 35 minutes. You guys still okay? Alright. We hear about this not infrequently. We get reports of black panthers. The key to this is there is no known black or melanistic form of the mountain lion, cougar, puma. 250 years living in North America, nobody has ever documented a black cougar, a black mountain lion. There are black panthers, there are black leopards in Africa, there are black jaguars occasionally in Central and South America. Occasionally a jaguar wanders into the States, so Arizona, Texas. We have black coyotes. Some of you may have seen them, got them. We have the occasional, very rare black bobcat. We have black labs, black bears. But in Wisconsin, nowhere has there been confirmed a black mountain lion. Okay? So there are large black cats, but nothing native to Wisconsin. We hear about this quite a bit. Well, before I go there, let me hide this because this is a cool story. Last year, an example of this. Last year, farmer outside Parade of Shame. And when I tell these stories, I use them to illustrate sort of the public perception. I'm not making fun, I'm not poking fun. But it is funny. Outside Parade of Shame sends a report into the local newspaper, the Parade of Shame Courier Press, I think it was. I had a pig killed on my farm. It was a huge black panther, killed my pig, drug it over here, ran off, climbed the tree. I saw it. He was so convinced this was a black panther, he spent apparently the night in his skid steer in his barnyard with a loaded gun in case that animal showed back up. That the paper put immediately without verifying anything, checking on it. On their Facebook page, that blew up, 8,000 views. I started looking through the comments, and it's like, yeah, they've been here for years. Black Panthers are going to be the death of agriculture. My kids, I'm moving to New York. I can't, just some more reasonable than that, but probably half of them buying it. In response to that, farmer said, yeah, I've got a picture of it. Here's the black panther that killed my pig and led me to sleep in my skid steer out in my barnyard. This is a round bale feeder. Right? So how big is that? You know, I got approval to submit something on Facebook sort of explaining that. To me, it's a black house cat. Right? It's barely above the height of that grazed or mowed grass, right?
But if that killed a pig, that's really scary.
One hell of a house cat. But the interesting thing is, so I submitted a paragraph or whatever, sort of explaining my belief. After that, probably 40% of the comments following my comments said, oh, that makes sense, yeah, that's too small. 60%, that's just like the DNR, we know we've got black panthers in the hills, etc. And I was going to play this, but have you seen the Return to Wildcat Mountain trailer that came out? From here east, there's apparently been a spate of black panther sightings. I'm not saying this can't be a large black cat. I'm skeptical because if they're as common as that video would lead you to believe, there are trail cameras all over in the woods. There are 680,000 hunters in the woods opening weekend. We have some confirmation of that. But if it is a black panther, it's not a black mountain lion. It'd probably only be a black jaguar, and it's likely an escape. People have these pets occasionally. A mountain lion that was confirmed near Wisconsin Dells a decade ago was one a trucker bought as a kitten, as a pet. The animal rode with him in his semi for 2 years until it scratched him, pulled over on I-39 outside the Dells and threw it out. And that's when we started getting pictures of it, right? Oh, yeah, it's a cougar. Well, you come to find out. So anyway, oh man. That's what I had for you. We're really good at managing black bears in terms of our wildlife management-ometer, which I hope you guys all have in your cars. Right? Wolves, we've learned a ton. We're dealing with federal legislation, listing issues to get where we need to be. Cougars are kind of the new kid on the block. We're learning how to engage the public. We're learning what potential cougar habitat we might have in the state. Are we gonna have a breeding population of cougars? Probably, if they keep spreading eastward, it's only gonna take a couple of females, but probably not until they establish somewhere in the middle first, like northern Minnesota. At that point, the females are gonna get here. All right, wow. That's it. Any questions? That was way more than, but that was fun.